Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. I decided, I've got a sense of humor about things, so I decided to title this Holiday Sex. And, think about it. The holidays are coming up. Thanksgiving is around the corner, and then after that, you've got Christmas, you've got New Year's, and then you're into Valentine's Day. So that's the next four, holidays. I know Valentine's Day isn't really a holiday per se, but it's a big event for lovers. Let's just put it that way. And thinking about holiday sex, something that I can remember about the holidays, and for most people, especially when you're dealing with the family showing up and you're trying to make plans for the occasion, you might have kids coming to stay, let's say they're away at college, they're coming to stay at home for a while, because they've got to clear out the campus unless they, expressly say they have nowhere to go. And then you've got the young kids who are out of school for, the Thanksgiving weekend. Some actually get the whole week. Then you skip a couple of weeks, or actually they're back in school for a few weeks, and then they get off for the end of the year, which should be the Christmas holiday for some. Well, thinking about sex during these times, think about it. Are you going to get any? Who knows? You're going to have a lot of stress. And stress is, for what they say about stress, they say stress is one of those things in life, and it seems to kill opportunity because it makes you scattered. It just, whatever. Well, think about it. If you have sex, maybe that'll help get rid of some of the stress. Of course, it may not be convenient when you want it, but I remember an old comedian who said something about they used to have sex just to keep their minds off of eating. So maybe it's a good diet aid. Thinking about it from that standpoint. Okay, I was trying to tell a joke there. But just the same, holiday sex, there's going to be a lot to do, and you're going to be busy, and setting time aside for being intimate with your partner is going to be one of the tasks that I'm going to say, put that on your list. Make it something that you plan for. Now, a lot of people don't like that because they're more into spontaneity. And I get that. That's a little more fun. And you can still have that too. But for those of you who struggle with actually finding time to be intimate because of all the responsibilities that you have, you're going to just have to plan time in for the lovemaking. Give it whatever code you want to give it. Put it in your planner. Put it on your phone so it's on the calendar and it'll remind you. It'll give you something to look forward to. You think about that. Isn't that something worth looking forward to? Sex with your lover. Who's not wanting that? So if you happen to notice that your partner is having some anxiety around the holidays, and holidays tend to bring this up, again, with all the responsibility and the emotional upheaval for some people trying to be the perfect host and hostess. The holidays often remind people of those that are no longer with us. So that could be an added stressor. And this is why some of the things that we are used to doing, our routines, getting switched around, having other people, having responsibilities, trying to have parties, those closest to you, like say your significant other, They may at times feel a bit neglected because of the pressure that we put on ourselves because of the holidays. And for some, the holidays are, like I said, a reminder of things that are really difficult. So there's some stress and depression and things like that tend to follow. And I'm bringing this up because there are those of you who aren't affected in this way. And because of that, it may just go right over your head as to what's happening to the other person. I mean, you may notice that there is a change in their behavior to some degree. You might not be able to put your finger on it. And if you haven't experienced it, other than to observe it, then you're just going to probably struggle with having an understanding of exactly what's going on. And I'm one of these kinds of individuals that say, if you sense something's going on with the person, talk with them. Try to get them to open up. Now, you may not be able to do it all at once. It may be something you have to chip away at. You may have to draw them out. Because sometimes people themselves don't even know that this is what's bothering them, that it's the holidays and it's all the stress. And people want to make it a good time. So when you think about all of these distractions that are happening, and if your partner seems to be less available for you, then it's probably stress. So I think the way to approach that is to address it in a very calm and supportive manner. And given that, these moments to bond may bring about that, that sense of wanting to be intimate on a much deeper level. Because one of the things that I have come to learn about people is that when they feel like they are being heard, being understood, they feel much closer to you. They feel like they want to open up and give you all of who they are. It may not be physical intimacy at the moment. It may be more of just the hugging, the more nurturing kinds of things. But the opportunity for being intimate, I think, will return. But given that you help the person learn to be able to reflect on what's happening and that you are there for their support, that could go a long way to them not only understanding themselves, but really getting to love you more for being such a tender, thoughtful person at that time. And one of the other things that I see that's a benefit from this is they learn to mirror that same type of deal for you. Should you happen to go through a difficult time for whatever reason. Like I say, the holidays tend to bring these things on more than anything else. If because the desire to have family around, those that are no longer with us, there's a remembrance for them, but also for those who are there and trying to make it a festive occasion, make it the most perfect occasion that you can for them. And if you're one of those that sort of has it on your radar that you're going to be facing these kinds of things, just think about what is in store for you. And if you're feeling a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, I think one of the things to consider doing is delegating some of these tasks to people around you. And I think what that will do is it will also help these other people feel like they are a part of it. And by that, they will be able to take some ownership in the entire process. And if they're young people and they're coming up, it's really good to help them learn to develop some bit of a tradition and to grow into the role of contributing. And I think that's wonderful for young people to learn that. But also to remember that you're teaching them, you're mentoring them in how to be a good host or hostess. And by virtue of that, relieve yourself of some of the stress and responsibility. And you get to be your loving, fun, and jovial self. And when you're ready, when the time is right for you and your partner to be a little more intimate, see how I pivoted to that part of the story, you can be there. You'll have something left over. Because as you know, being around the holidays can be very, very, very exhausting. and even for all the good reasons, but it can be very exhausting. I'm going to take a break right here, and I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, talking about holiday sex. Okay, back to the subject at hand, holiday sex. You know what? What do you like about this time of year? It's the parties. It's the gatherings and people, especially the costume parties. People are going to come out looking like either Santa's elves or Santa's helpers, Santa Claus, something of that theme. And, but yeah, some of these costumes nowadays, I mean, they're pretty hot looking. I've got this friend, her name is Sandra. Now, I've known Sandra for years, and every once in a while I'll see something on her Facebook page in which she posts some photographs from some gathering, and she has some of the hottest costumes, I mean, year round, whether it's Christmas, whether it's Halloween, 4th of July, or something. She knows how to make a costume look good. I mean, she's a fairly attractive woman anyway, but it's nice that she gets festive with it and plays the role. So it's kind of fun to see people really take on this different persona and wear the costumes for, like I say, the Christmas parties. And I'm not really much of a costume guy because I'm just not creative in that sense. I'll probably have to have somebody dress me up or something like that. But just finding somebody who's really festive, really into those kinds of things. And like I say, some pretty hot costumes. So what do you do when you have a costume and you spend all this time putting the thing together? You go to the party and then you go to home. What do? You just kind of put the costume in a box and wait for next year, or do you use it as part of your foreplay into the rest of the activities? Now, if you have a little something left over after the party, hopefully you haven't consumed too much alcohol or too much food, and you feel like you've got a little something left over for your partner. Maybe you skipped out a little early just so that you can have a little fun time with your significant other. So maybe you make that costume part of your, like I said, part of your foreplay. If you haven't thought of it, well, I encourage you to do it. Take advantage of that moment, that opportunity, so that you'll create some new memories with you and your fun one. And for you guys, look, this isn't just for ladies to go on and put on the costumes. I want to know that you guys are really making an effort here and not just taking in the view, but participating in the whole idea of being, let's say, enticing to your significant other so that you can have some holiday sex, so you can make some memories with that. Because women do talk. Women will share that they've had a great time with their man. And with that, and maybe they don't even say it outright. It's just the look that they have on their face. Because I know women, they can read each other. And when a woman has had a good evening, whether she comes into work looking a little bit tired, she might get the question and say, I guess you didn't get really rested that night, at least not the kind of rest the rest of us got. It's kind of fun. But guys, remember to be part of the festivities. Get your costumes ready. Think about what you want to do with your partner and make some time for it. Like one of my most favorite things to do is helping people reach their potential. And right now we're just about a week or so out from Thanksgiving. So with Christmas parties being around the corner, and most people have their Christmas parties within, say, maybe a week or two ahead of Christmas, depending upon, if it's an office party or if you're an academic thing, then you'd have to have it before everybody leaves. But consider getting a costume for your partner. Boy, wouldn't that be fun? And asking them to have a bit of trust and just put the thing on. I know, hey, I've known women who really appreciate the fact that a guy will do some shopping for them. And this is an excellent opportunity, guys, for you to find a partner, find a costume for your partner and get something hot going. You know it? You know what I mean? Get something really, really hot going. And don't just be an observer. Remember, you got to get a costume too. And say like a pirate and Mrs. Pirate. How about that? And get her an eye patch too. That's kind of sexy, right? Okay. But the whole idea is just to lighten it up and have a good time with your partner. And I suggest take pictures of yourself with these costumes on, because again, it's going to be one of those things that's going to be memorable. And when you take the pictures, with your costumes on, and make copies of that. Put them in a photo album or put them on the mirror in the bathroom or something like that. That way it reminds you of some of the fun stuff you do. Like I did a podcast on relationships also. And one of the things that I talked about in that particular podcast was about how to keep things fun and interesting and engaging for your partner, and being thoughtful about that. How you can have an interesting, fun, good relationship. And it's about creating memories and taking the stress off. So here's an opportunity, like I said, for the Christmas party to go out, have a good time, be fun, be around people you enjoy, and especially your significant other, and show each other off for a while. That's fun. Point out how nice your partner looks in their costume, and they'll look at you with that glint in the eye and say, hey, and you're pretty nice looking yourself, huh? Hey, how about we get together afterwards and see if we can generate some heat? You know what I mean? Okay, so look, I'm going to pivot to something, and I might consider adding this to the podcast. I do a little bit of research and try to find things that I thought might be interesting for me to mention. And here's something that's come up. And if you're not aware, then this will be a first for you. If you already know it, then great. But as we know, or many of you know, that young ladies are given a vaccine for the HPV, human papillomavirus, and it's normally given to young ladies when they become adolescents, and it's to help prevent them from getting herpes and things like that, because there's a vaccine for that. Now they give this to young men too, and it's to help prevent them from getting those types of viruses as well. You can do a little bit of research on this yourself. I'm just kind of remembering this off the top of my head. But I find that it's extremely important, because I was reading some information just this week about how many types of cancers, now I'm saying the word cancer, that happen because of the HPV virus. Now, I was amazed at that. I'm going to do a little more reading, a little more research, but I wanted to pass that information on so that if you who are listening to this podcast, if you haven't had an HPV vaccine, then I suggest you get one. Talk to your healthcare provider about that for you. Now, there may be some broader restrictions on how it can protect you if you've already been exposed to the HPV. So something to know about this particular virus is that 70 to 90% of the people in the population have it in some form. Now, it is something that lives in the body, so and it's transmitted in various ways. But the thing to know about it, and this is something that I have, I can't say that I personally experienced, but in doing some reading and some research and people who have experienced it, is if you're with a partner and you've never had an outbreak of herpes, but you now find yourself feeling like you have a new partner, you're getting an outbreak, maybe the partner is not responsible for that. It could have been something that may have been lying dormant in your system. You may have been exposed to it long before you receive an outbreak. And that's kind of one of the natures of this particular virus. I got to take a break here, and I'm going to pick back up with this thread in a moment. Please stay tuned.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Okay, it's John Johnson back to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, and I've been talking about HPV. And the reason I was bringing this up is because I had a conversation with somebody who was experiencing something, and it was causing them a little bit of stress. Now, you can be tested for this to find out if you have been exposed to it. And like I said, there's a large percentage of the population that has been exposed and have some form of the virus, but it is dormant in their systems, and there is something of a stressor that generally comes up and makes the body exposed to it. So let's say you have a new lover and you have an outbreak. So the natural thought is to say, well, this new lover is the cause of that. In particular, if you're not having protected sex. And, you could have outbreaks in different places of the body and then exposed, and that can cause all kinds of things. So there are many ways of transmission of this. But back to the point is, because if you have a new lover and you have an outbreak, like I said, the natural thought is to say, well, this new lover is the cause of that. And it may not be. You have to be mindful of the fact that, like I said, the HPV is something that lies dormant in the system. Something comes up of a stressor, you have an outbreak, and it's very uncomfortable, no doubt. But if your new partner is telling you, look, I didn't bring this on to you, and it's causing some stress, like I said, you both can get tested to at least have some understanding of, maybe your partner doesn't have it. And fortunately, if there's somebody who's had a vaccine for it, then they can pretty much, the body can develop the antibodies to protect themselves from something like this. So that's just a piece of information for conversation. And here's another piece of information, it's sort of a blockbuster thing. AIDS, acquired immune deficiency, has been around for many, many, many years. And they've been doing lots of research on trying to find a cure. Most people who have had the AIDS, we went from dying from this disease to being able to take a cocktail of medications to prolong people's lives, and people are living longer and longer. Now, the information that I have is that fairly soon they are going to be doing clinical trials for an AIDS vaccine, so that you can it'll help you prevent from getting AIDS. And that's fascinating. And for those people who may already have it, they can be given this, and it will help their body fight it, and they can live a much better quality of life. That's the goal for something like this. This is not gossip. This is actually new. The clinical trials will be starting fairly soon if they haven't started already. And what's fascinating about it is it's obviously taken a while to get here to this point in time where we can look forward to being able to find cures for something like this. And that's what we're on the cusp of having a breakthrough. Like I say, the clinical trials themselves will give something that's a little more conclusive. But up to this point, it seems like it could be fairly promising. And I'm reporting that based on the information that I have, and I believe it to be fairly accurate. If there is any change in that, I would be very quick to update you on that. But it looks very good, and I'm really hoping the best for this. So it's been a research project that's been many, many years in the making, and I'm sure that there will be other press releases regarding this in the not too distant future. So yes, what I'm reporting to you is that they are on the cusp of a breakthrough for a cure for AIDS, acquired immune deficiency. So what that does is that kind of I want to bring this full circle, and I want to talk about safe sex. And what you do when you have new partners, it's about being tested. It's about being mindful that you do have a sex history. And as I talked about the HPV and herpes, and how often many of us have that and we don't even know it, and we could potentially pass it on to our new partners. Getting tested, you can be tested for that as well. You know, there's the venereal diseases like chlamydia, syphilis, gonorrhea. Most of those have some sort of symptom that people become alarmed about, and then they get tested. Herpes, you know, there's type 1 and type 2. There's oral herpes and there's genital herpes. It's usually after an outbreak that people become aware that they have it. And like I say, you can be tested for that as well. And I suggest you do, so that you have an information on your own sex history and protect, and then have safe sex practices. That would be barriers such as condoms, dams, that sort of thing. And if in the case of, if you have herpes, if you sense that you are having an outbreak, that is not a good time to be sexually active, because you could spread it to your partner, and you don't want to do that. That's not a very loving, thoughtful thing to do. And so here's something else to think about. If you are somebody who has herpes 1 or 2, it would be responsible that you share that information with your partner, and especially if they're a new relationship. Now, some people may just choose that they don't want to be in a relationship with somebody who may have it, and that's certainly their right. But you do owe them the fact that you would tell them and let them make a choice for themselves. And in the case of others, if they've already got it in their system, they may just tell you, well, look, you know, I've got it too. It's no big deal, and we can go on from there. But, you know, we're square. We're above board on the information. And I really feel, and I want to stress this to people, it may be a bit uncomfortable to talk about something like this, because there may be a stigma, and it really depends on who you speak to. Hopefully, if you are considering being physically intimate with a person, that you can be adult enough to have this particular conversation and not come away with some sort of shame if you decide that being sexual is not something that you both want to do. But recognizing the responsibility that you have to not infect another person, I think that is tantamount here, because we're not just talking about a classy thing to do. We're talking about being responsible in being sexual. That infecting another person is not the thing you want to do, and having them blind to the fact that there is a potential risk for them. You don't want to do that. So it may be hard to do this when you're in the moment. That's why you have a conversation about something like this well ahead of any sexual tendencies, where you're starting to feel amorous, you feel like you want to be physically intimate. You got to have this conversation long before you get to that point, because at that point, a lot of people don't have if I'm going to use this word, willpower to not be sexual. Now, in the case of using contraceptives, they can only protect so much, because in and of itself, some of these, like say HPV, it's not just something that is on the male organ. You can have exposure in the genital area, and once there's contact with that, especially if it's an open sore, then you now can run the risk of a transmission in that regard. So there's enough information out there. You can get educated on it. I've just given you a brief overview of some of the things, but in this day and age, there's information on the internet. There are healthcare providers that are very happy to give you information. And I realize for young people, now this is something that we still have to work on. I know they talk about sex education, they talk about venereal disease, but oftentimes they don't tell you how to get treated. They may in some casual way say, talk to a doctor. Well, yes, that's a very, very important step. There are public health clinics that you can contact. There are resources on the internet. You can put in venereal disease and you're going to find information about diseases themselves and resources on how to get treated. And I encourage you, young people, it's part of the education system now that they're trying to get better at giving you the information. But, there's always this slow walk to how much do we tell kids, because I think the fear is that the more that we tell them, then they're going to be more promiscuous, to use a word. I think we need to inform people on how to protect themselves. And the conversation is out there. And when the more candid we are, the more adult and responsible we can be about passing on the information, because this isn't kid stuff. This is stuff that you need to know to protect yourselves, because if you don't, then the risks are very, very great. And that's why I want to go with that. Look, I'm going to wrap up this podcast now, but with the thought that we are close to the holidays, I hope you're going to enjoy yours and your family. And all in all, be safe. I'm John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast. Thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.